Tonight, Home Affairs and the FBI work with Ticketmaster after reports hackers have stolen the details of 500 million customers. The Immigration Minister Andrew Giles recancels the visas of 7 people with criminal histories. The coalition calls on him to resign. The sex workers taking on the big bags claiming financial discrimination. And it's Baker's delight for the winner of this year's Archibald Packing Room Prize. Good evening, Jeremy Fernandez with ABC News. It's shaping up as one of the largest cyber breaches in recent times, affecting 500 million people worldwide. A notorious hacking group claims it has the details of Ticketmaster customers and has threatened to sell them on the dark web. The ticketing agency has millions of customers in Australia who are yet to be told which pieces of personal data have been stolen.
Tickets to Cold Chisel and Crowded House are going on sale. But to purchase them, you'll need to use Ticketmaster, the latest online platform that has allegedly been hacked.
In terms of raw numbers, it would be one of the biggest data breaches we've ever seen.
Criminal hacking group Shiny Hunters claims to have stolen the name, address, email, phone number and credit card details of more than 500 million customers worldwide. It's threatening to sell the data on the dark web for more than $500,000. One expert believes as many as 2 million Australians have been affected.
First thing when I heard it, I logged onto my account to check my credit cards and unfortunately had 3 cards in our systems. If the data's gone, it's data's gone.
I thought, wow, I've only used it once and it makes me feel unsafe now. I'm a bit worried.
Following a horror run in the US, with unhappy Taylor Swift fans unable to get tickets, then a legal push to break up the company, Ticketmaster is now facing angry customers demanding more information.
It's just communication 101, just get it out there and let people know we're looking into it and we'll keep you updated, and there's been nothing.
The Australian government says it's been in contact with Ticketmaster as it tries to work out the scale of the cyber breach.
We have an organisation that has said nothing. There's been no public communications. There's been no communications to affected customers. It's probably one of the highest failures that we've seen.
The FBI has offered assistance to Australian authorities. Amy Greenbank, ABC News.
The Prime Minister is denying Australia's immigration policy has been prescribed by New Zealand during a heated debate in federal parliament. Anthony Albanese's government is cancelling visas for dozens of convicted criminals permitted to remain in Australia as a result of a contentious policy signed by the Immigration Minister. Here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
A brief parliamentary reprieve for an embattled minister.
My question is to the Prime Minister.
His boss now in the opposition's sights.
Why did this weak and incompetent Prime Minister put his close and sycophantic relationship with Jacinda Ardern ahead of the safety of Australians?
All the anger's there in just one question. The anger, the abuse.
The Immigration Minister's been condemned for a direction he penned dictating officials and tribunals take into account the length and strength of a foreign national's ties to the community before cancelling their visas. Convicted criminals from New Zealand and elsewhere allowed to stay in the country as a result.
Did the Prime Minister implement Direction 99 at the request of New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern?
The premise of this dry gully that the opposition is going down is completely wrong.
The Prime Minister returning serve.
On this bloke's watch, 1,300 hardcore criminals were released from immigration.
Convicted sex offenders, murderers and accessories to murder, including a British man who
helped another man carry the victim's body to the boot of a car and dump it in a makeshift grave.
And a New Zealander
convicted of 3 charges of an indecent act with a child under 16.
They've involved impartial, independent public servants in a grubby dirt-digging exercise on their predecessors. That is corrupt conduct.
Successive New Zealand governments had complained about Australian immigration policies, now worried the Albanese government is tearing up this policy Foreign Minister Winston Peters warning they do not want to see the deportation of people with little or no connection to New Zealand. Home Affairs officials are scrambling to draft a new direction for the Immigration Minister to put in place, and Andrew Giles is trying to clean up the mess caused by the existing edict, cancelling the visas of at least 8 convicted criminals who've been allowed to remain in Australia. Given the pressure and the scrutiny that's been on Andrew Giles this week, the new policy will have to be watertight. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
A day after the Premier announced ambitious new housing targets, dwelling approvals have fallen in New South Wales for the second month in a row. The government admits the construction industry is being squeezed, but it still hopes to build its way out of an affordability crisis.
Just a 10-minute bus ride from the city centre, this former industrial site's been transformed. Dozens of townhouses and units now overlook a lush courtyard. It's exactly the type of project the Planning Minister hopes councils will build to meet their newly announced targets.
I remain optimistic that councils will step up to our shared responsibility.
These targets are unreasonable and they're unfeasible.
The Mayor of the Hills Shire and state Liberal colleagues insist the local infrastructure won't cope. That's despite the presence of a metro just metres away.
Our schools are way overcrowded here in the Hills. Our roads are already choked.
The Hills has to build more than 23,000 homes in 5 years, but it's already got 75% planned, approved or underway. Blackdown's target is over 21,000, but it's got 80% in the pipeline already. Parramatta needs to build 19,500, but it has 85% in the planning system, and Liverpool's target is 16,700, and 90% of that's already on the books. But new ABS data's revealed a second monthly drop in total dwelling approvals. Industry's blaming the levies the government charges to build infrastructure.
The cumulative impacts of these fees, taxes and charges is cruelling feasibility. And the banks are rightfully saying, well, there's too much risk here, I won't lend you the money.
The government says councils that don't even attempt to meet their targets could have an administrator appointed to oversee planning decisions. But the minister hopes it won't come to that.
We're developing a league table of council performance, which will be published soon.
Any council deemed unconstructive will be named and shamed. Nick Dole, ABC News, Sydney.
A domestic violence victim in Sydney says she and her 3 young children have been left homeless because shelters across the city are full. She doesn't want to be identified but felt compelled to share her story to highlight the ongoing lack of support for women trying to escape violence.
3 weeks ago, this woman's partner allegedly punched her and held a knife to her throat. After several years of abuse, it was the final straw for this mother, who we'll call Jade.
Sometimes I'd have black eyes or my hand's been stabbed before.
He's behind bars after being charged over the most recent attack. But Jade and her 3 young children are now homeless. They had to leave his home when he was arrested. Despite reaching out to domestic violence services weeks before the latest alleged assault, she was told there was nowhere suitable for them to go.
There's no vacancies in refuges or anything like that because they've got no resources for it at the moment.
Jade and her children, all aged under 4, spent a night sleeping in the car before being moved to a hotel.
It's not even a bedroom, just a room in a motel with a bed, not even nowhere to wash my kids' bottles, nothing.
They're now in crisis accommodation, but they can't stay there, and there's a lengthy waiting list for affordable housing.
Sometimes I would sit there and think, should I just give up and just go back, because I felt like I was hopeless, there was nothing that I could do, I'm just being given dead ends.
Those on the front line say Jade's story is still far too common.
We know, for example, that in the most recent shelter that we opened, we're turning away 9 out of 10 people who approach us for help.
Ms Daniels says the government could use former nursing homes or hotels as crisis housing.
In a statement to ABC News, Homelessness Minister Rose Jackson said it was not good enough that families like Jade's were being turned away from shelters. The minister said the department was exploring any government-owned properties that could be urgently converted into crisis accommodation while more housing is built. What do you need right now to help support you?
Secure housing for me and my kids.
Since being contacted by the ABC, the Department of Housing has found Jade and her children a home. Leah Harris, ABC News, Sydney.
One of 3 Macarthur FC players charged over an A-League international betting scandal has faced court for the first time. Midfielder Kieran Backus is accused of manipulating yellow cards for gambling purposes during 2 matches late last year. It's alleged Macarthur captain Ulysses de Villa took instructions from a crime figure in South America to orchestrate fouls with the intention of receiving yellow cards. Police say the captain recruited Mr Backus and teammate Clayton Lewis to participate by paying them $10,000. Mr Backus fronted Campbelltown local court today, where his matter was adjourned until next month. Federal police say more than 4,000 litres of a date rape drug have been seized in Sydney since new laws came into effect in March. The substance, commonly known as bute, was banned after being increasingly linked to sexual assaults and overdoses. The industrial chemical is used to make plastics and paint thinner, but can also slow down the body's central nervous system when it's ingested, causing hallucinations. The AFP says it's on alert to criminal syndicates hiding the drug in body oils, face masks and food products. Those caught importing it could now face a maximum penalty of life in prison. Despite being fully decriminalised in multiple states across Australia, many sex workers are still battling to use basic business tools like EFTPOS or credit cards. But some in the adult industry are now fighting back against financial discrimination.
Matthew Roberts spends a lot of time talking to people in his industry about the issues that they face getting banking services.
As you know, I run a business, just like you do, and I just can't get an EFTPOS machine.
I had a very similar experience when I was trying to buy this business.
Now Matthew may have set a precedent after he took on 2 finance companies who withdrew his access to this EFTPOS facility.
We ultimately got both companies to flip their policies and end their blanket ban on sex work.
Matthew's lawyers ran his case under state rules that were brought in 2 years ago.
Sex work in Victoria is decriminalised, and it is now unlawful to discriminate against someone on the basis of a lawful occupation.
It is a very different situation in Western Australia, where there is no anti-discrimination protections and this brothel is still technically illegal.
Now the sex workers can't even buy a house if they've declared their source income as a sex worker. You see, we haven't got a fair, equal law in Perth that allows us to handle these problems.
There is now this patchwork of rules around sex work across Australia, and even with some states like Queensland introducing anti-discrimination protections, it is clear that many sex workers and adult businesses are still struggling with financial discrimination. NAB, for instance, entirely refuses banking services to brothels and escort agencies, claiming they are too risky.
We believe that is really a scapegoat argument and that it's really discrimination that's at play.
Matthew Roberts says he hopes that others can fight back as well. Amelia Terzon, ABC News.
It's the nation's most prestigious portrait award, the Archibald Prize, and each year packing room staff at the Art Gallery of New South Wales pick a work they think should win the title. Today, the Packing Room Prize has gone to a painting that joins 56 other finalists for the main prize worth $100,000.
The winner of the Packing Room Prize for 2024 is Matt Adnate and his portrait of Baker Boy.
From the alleyways of Melbourne to the country's most prestigious portraiture competition, Matt Adnate blends graffiti and hip-hop in his vision of rapper Baker Boy.
As a graffiti artist, I never dreamt of being able to even hang one of my artworks in a place like the Art Gallery of New South Wales. So to be a finalist 2 years in a row and then to win the Packing Room Prize, it's something I've never dreamt of.
Baker's Yolngu roots in Arnhem Land, reflected in his stare, caught the eye of the judges.
He was able to capture Baker Boy's power through his gaze and really encapsulate the colour and life and spirit that Baker Boy brings.
57 pieces have been selected as finalists in this year's Archibald, with the gallery receiving more than 2,300 entries across the Wynne, Sulman and Archibald competitions.
As a rule, all portraits must begin with a live sitting, meaning the artist behind this work had to find particularly creative ways to sketch Julian Assange.
He couldn't take any artist materials into the prison, but he could take £25 in cash to spend in the canteen. He bought chocolate with the notes left over. When he met with Julian, he sketched with his fingernail and chocolate on those notes, and that was the basis for the portrait.
Another man who knows confinement is Mustafa Azimitabar, a refugee who was detained in Melbourne's hotels for 14 months.
It reminds me of the moments I started painting with toothbrush when I was in detention, but now I am not. There is no fence between you and I.
Artists a step closer to the $100,000 prize to be announced next month. Sean Turek-Goodwin, ABC News, Sydney.
Coming up on 7:30, could climate change be increasing because of air turbulence?
We're 10 kilometres in the air in an aluminium tube in a dynamic environment.
Everything just went bang. It seemed like hell broke loose.
One of the things that is in the passenger's control is the ability to wear their seatbelt when they're seated.
Also, I'll be joined by Broadway legend Patti LuPone.
There's renewed hope Australia's trade war with China is nearing its end, with the government in Beijing lifting import bans on 5 meatworks overnight. The abattoirs in Queensland and New South Wales had been exporting close to $1 billion worth of meat to China when they were locked out of the high-value market in 2020. Beef was one of the first Australian products to be hit with trade sanctions from China. That also extended to wine, coal, barley and lobsters. While China said the meat bans were due to technical reasons, it was widely believed to be an act of political retribution.
China's progressive removal of impediments since then, including today's announcement, means less than $1 billion worth of exports remain impeded, and we continue to work hard to resolve them.
An Australian activist is facing life behind bars in Hong Kong after being convicted under a national security law imposed by the Chinese government. The dual citizen Gordon Ng was convicted of subversion, along with 13 other high-profile democracy activists. It comes more than 3 years after police conducted mass raids in a crackdown by authorities. The Foreign Minister Penny Wong says she's deeply concerned by the verdict, and the government is requesting consular access to Mr Ng, who was detained in early 2021. He's previously written a letter from detention saying he misses Australia and considers himself a Sydney-sider. He'll be sentenced at a later date. Specialist crews from Australia have now touched down in Papua New Guinea following the devastating landslides. The country's Prime Minister has blamed extraordinary rainfall for the disaster as he faces criticism for being too slow to respond. A mass relocation effort for survivors is now being planned, with fears more landslides could come.
The sound of a shattered community. Men, women and children evacuated from settlements devastated by the landslide gather together, facing a deeply uncertain future.
Gardens and houses have all been destroyed. We need food to eat and houses to sleep.
Aid is slowly getting in, and a nearby gold mine is promising to send heavy machinery to recover bodies still buried under the rubble and earth. But there are fears the danger isn't over.
The stones from the mountain still keep falling. Our houses have been destroyed and we want the government to help us.
Officials want to relocate up to 10,000 people from nearby villages that they believe are at risk of further landslides. But it's a massive undertaking.
Being a rural province, we don't have the capacity or the know-how to deal with a disaster of this magnitude.
Facing a likely no-confidence motion in Parliament this week, Prime Minister James Marape has been accused of focusing on keeping his job and not relief. He's now announced he'll visit the devastated region tomorrow. It's been almost a week since these highland settlements were swamped by the landslide, and the full magnitude of the disaster, as well as the final death toll, remain a mystery. PNG's leaders say their sharp focus is now entirely on the relief effort. Those waiting for help will hope that that's true. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Port Moresby.
The jury in the Donald Trump criminal trial in New York has failed to reach a verdict on the first day of deliberations. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty to falsifying business records to cover up a payment to a porn star before the 2016 election. The judge gave the jurors instructions that they must set aside their personal views of Mr. Trump. Artificially generated videos are being used to influence voters in the world's biggest election. The country is in the final stage of its huge ballot, and AI is revolutionising the political landscape.
From resurrecting deceased politicians to cloning former presidents, AI has become a decisive and divisive tool this election campaign.
There is significant risk of misuse when such powerful technology is placed in unskilled hands.
Sanctioned deepfakes are a $60 million business in India. Devyendra Singh Jadon has had hundreds of requests from political parties since October last year.
It's a new kind of technology, it's a new kind of campaigning.
But Devyendra says he won't make unethical content.
We are creating like AI-generated videos, AI-generated songs, like we also did AR campaigns.
After filming this man for just a few minutes, Devyendra can clone his voice and have him deliver a personalised message to voters in any of India's 22 languages.
More than 800 million people are connected to internet, and the data rates are so cheap, and obviously political parties have such good network and distribution channels where they can reach out to more masses.
Sagar Vishnoi runs workshops to help law enforcement counter deepfakes.
It can even create riots or disturb the social fabric of the nation by making some political leaders speak about some religion or caste.
It's a constant battle for fact checkers.
It is very difficult to change the mind of somebody who is willing to believe a lie as long as it furthers their own beliefs and their own confirmation and their own biases.
Experts say the technology will evolve to a point where it'll be almost impossible for the average viewer to identify a deep fake. In fact, what you're seeing right now has been artificially generated. Meghna Bali, ABC News, Pushkar.
The ABC's managing director has defended the high-profile journalist Laura Tingle over comments she made about racism and the opposition leader. At a Sydney Writers' Festival last weekend, Ms Tingle said that Australia was a racist country, and she criticised Peter Dutton for blaming migrants for shortages in housing and services. The ABC's news director counselled Ms Tingle for not providing sufficient context, balance and supporting information. Managing Director David Anderson was questioned about Ms Tingle's comments by a parliamentary committee. He said the lack of context at the time was problematic, but he stands by her journalism.
The matter is resolved with her clarification that she has put out yesterday, and was satisfied that she is able to continue doing her role, and satisfied that Ms Tingle understands, hence her regret, and I agree with her, with regard to the fact that her comments were generalised and not qualified.
Let's go to finance now with Alan Kohler.
The share market is rolling over because investors are giving up on the idea that rate cuts will happen this year. Inflation is not coming down fast enough, so they're having to rethink what they pay for shares and other assets. As a result, the local market has fallen about 2% in 3 days, taking the All Ordinaries back below 7,900, which is almost exactly where it started the year. Today's big news is that BHP has abandoned its pursuit of the South African miner Anglo American. The offer was $75 billion, but it wasn't enough. So the big Australian will have to look elsewhere to expand its copper business. Copper miners everywhere are checking that their doorbell works and putting the kettle on. The reason BHP wants to have more copper is that it's the best conductor of electricity, and demand for electricity is going through the roof because of artificial intelligence and cryptocurrencies, as well as the growth of data centres. AI and crypto in particular require colossal amounts of electricity, and copper is what it travels on. Copper fell a bit last night, but it's up 20% year to date. Global markets fell today, led by a 0.7% drop in New York, and the Aussie dollar was steady at 66 US cents. Today's data release from the ABS was housing approvals, down again to another 12-year low. Approvals in the past 12 months were 163,500, compared to the 240,000 per year required to meet the government's target that starts on July the 1st. So they've got a month to come up with another 76,500 houses. It'll be fine. And that's finance.
Prosecutors in the US have dropped criminal charges against the world's top golfer, Scotty Scheffler. Scheffler was led away in handcuffs after allegedly disobeying police who were redirecting traffic near the PGA Championship 2 weeks ago. The court today agreed with the golfer that it had been a misunderstanding in a chaotic situation. Scotty Scheffler welcomed the news on social media, saying he hoped he and the officer involved could put the incident behind them. A Gold Coast skateboarding sensation has become the first female ever to land a near impossible trick. Last year, the 14-year-old from Palm Beach was the first female to land a 720, a jump made famous by the pro skater Tony Hawk. Now, Arissa True has done one better, landing a 900, spinning 2.5 times in the air. The teen has got her sights set on making the Australian Olympic team for Paris 2024. Collectors can now get their hands on some unique Paris Olympics memorabilia thanks to the Royal Australian Mint's newest coin series. 4 commemorative uncirculated coins have been minted in limited quantities, 2 of them Olympic-themed and 2 Paralympic-themed. They honour athletes in swimming, triple jump, para-table tennis and para-track and field. It's just the 3rd time Australia's Olympic and Paralympic teams have been immortalised on currency. Let's take a look at the weather now. And Tom, the first drops of rain are now falling over the west.
Jeremy, an enormous 5,000-kilometre long cloud band extends from the Kimberley all the way to south of Tasmania. Now, for our state, the eastern edge of that band is only thin high cloud, not causing rain. However, further west, steady falls have commenced. Since 9 a.m, Deniliquin has picked up 19 millimetres, but there's much more rain ahead during the coming week. 3 systems, in fact, worth watching. Firstly, our initial rain band, which will sweep across the state during the next 36 hours. Now, that's followed by a Tasman low, which will maintain rain through some parts of eastern New South Wales on Sunday. That low will then move towards the south. However, another band of patchy rain should arrive from the west through about Tuesday and Wednesday before the Tasman low moves north again and perhaps brings further rain around Thursday. When combined, the 3 systems will bring at least 20 millimetres to most of the state over the next week, with well over 50 millimetres for parts of the coast and the ranges. The other major change in the weather as we slip into winter will be a drop in temperatures. Today in Sydney, it was noticeably warmer thanks to northerly winds. After a low of 11, we reached a top of 24, 5 above the average. That was our warmest day for a month. The cooler start for the west was followed by highs of 23 to 25. The statewide minimums were as much as 7 above the average in the west under cloud cover, and it was as much as 5 below the average across the east. Today's maximums were as much as 5 above average, including 22 degrees in Albury. Now back to that satellite. The northwest cloud band, it's a real classic. They form as tropical moisture streams towards the southeast and is lifted by colder air to the west. Now on the chart, that cold air is arriving behind this cold front, which is moving east and will push the rain band towards the coast. Around the country tomorrow, rain for Canberra, 16, a shower or 2 for Brisbane and Hobart. For the northeast, rain developing across the Hunter in the afternoon, although only light falls. Showers reaching the northern ranges and the mid-north coast later. It's only a medium chance of showers tomorrow for the northern rivers. They're most likely at night. For the southeast, overnight rain for the ranges, which will reach the coast in the morning, but only very patchy falls for the south coast. That rain will contract up to the central tablelands in the afternoon. To the west, up to 40 millimetres across the south overnight before the rain contracts to the central west slopes and plains and the northern areas tomorrow. There will be a cooler westerly change that will drop the maximums below 20 in most towns. On the waters, strong winds south of Smoky Cape and seas climbing to 3 metres. For Sydney, a milder night under cloud, light rain developing tomorrow, only patchy, northerly winds, temperature range 15 to 22 degrees in the city, tops of 21 for other suburbs. The sun will rise at 6:50 and ahead. Heavier rain will arrive on Saturday, 17 to 19 degrees. Rain, chance of a storm Sunday, 16 to 18, easing Monday. Sydney could see anything from 20 to 100 millimetres. Jeremy.
Tom, thank you. Here's Sarah Ferguson for you now with 7:30.